And here we are, episode 5, series 7, Gordon and Das. How are we doing? Welcome to Whisky Unscripted. I'm sounding different. Where are we?
Well, I'm not. Well, we've just had a great tour. We've been at Clydeside with Alistair McDonald here, and we've had a great tour of this wonderful distillery. If you've not been here, come here on the Clydeside, reflecting the history of the area. Alistair, thanks for a great tour, and I know you've got, some interesting whiskies and things coming out shortly, but you're 6 years into this project. We've tasted some of your whiskies, so they're not the oldest, but by God, they taste fantastic.
Yes, we feel as though what we're doing here is slightly different from some distilleries, but the focus is, as you say, on the quality. And yeah, young, we can't do anything about the age, but we're getting there, and Stobcross has been evolving through the last 5 years, and it will, it will eventually cap the age on it, but it's doing wonderful at the moment. We're getting really good feedback on it. We're about to release our first limited edition, a cask strength bourbon, this week, and I'll give you the chance to try that and see what you think shortly. And obviously the whole journey that we're on here is about the long term. It's not about just a quick fix. It's about the long journey and creating quality products for our and your consumers to come and try and tell us what you think about it.
It's been absolutely delicious, but before I go on and we get this episode off and running, you guys know each other. Is that true? Where do you know each other from? And don't say the local prison.
No, we do. We used to work with each other when I was working at Morrison B'Moores. You'd been with the business quite a long time before that.
Yep.
And you were the Auchentoshan distillery manager.
Yeah, that's right. As Gordon says, I was starting my life in Bowmore Distillery, of all places, as a distillery engineer, and then moved to Glasgow and became distillery manager eventually at Auchentoshan, where I met Gordon doing his brand work and selling the good quality products. So again, just moved along the road a bit here to Clydeside, but hopefully producing a quality whisky that maybe one day will compete with the brand of Morrison Bowmore.
And just for people that are listening out with Scotland, could you just tell us where we are geographically and what's outside? Because it's a beautiful tasting room. We're just going to. Sorry.
Yeah, so we're here in, as you say, in Glasgow, right in the city. So we're one of the first distilleries right in the city, in the heart of the city, producing here at the former Queen's Dock, which was a dock that was where the SEC and the hydro is now. It's all been filled in, but this was a working dock from 1877 through to the late 1960s, and ships were exporting whisky all over the world from this dock where we are standing at the moment. So a really nice link to bring whisky distilling into this area again, and something for the city to shout about.
That's brilliant.
So you want a perfect day out in Glasgow? Clydeside Distillery in the morning, Glengoyne Distillery in the afternoon. What a perfect day that is.
It's been a perfect day today, I have to say. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and that sounds good to me, and I'll be along to see you at Glengoyne too. Yeah, thank you.
Coming up in this episode, what way to start, Gordon? Coming up, we've got our very own Mike interviewing Greg Swartz from the movie Water of Life.
Oh, right, I thought not from the Pepper Empire.
No. And he's right behind us. Say hello, guys. Way! It's been a great day. Cut to two guys back in the studio. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
I don't know about you, Gordon, but those two guys are very, very educated, quite intelligent. They sound very nice.
I think you really need that to convey the knowledge to the, to the listeners, and really, really knowledgeable people. And Alistair was fabulous as well.
No, it was great. I was talking, sending ourselves back to the studio. So here we are back in the studio.
What a great day that was, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And that was us in the filling store at Clydeside Distillery, Gordon. So really, what I liked about it, a bit of history about Glasgow.
Oh, it was interesting. Very interesting. And I mean, we had a great day, and Alistair and Brigdean at Clydeside were both fabulous and very welcoming. And if you've never been, I mean, I would say if you're visiting Glasgow, as we said at the end, Glengoyne's fabulous, absolutely. You want an industrial Glasgow look at feel, Clydeside, brilliant, really, really good.
You talk about the boom that's going on at the moment in Scottish whisky and all these distilleries opening up. And we did say before, kind of fear for some distilleries, but I think they've got a really solid footing there.
Oh, very. Look, it's they know the industry as a business. The Morrisons, Morrison B'Moore, they know the industry. They know the the market. They're very clever people there. They've got good people in place. They're absolutely fabulous.
So that was a great, and I quite liked about this part. That was almost like a pre-credit sequence. That was almost us doing a James Bond style pre-credit to the actual podcast. So welcome officially again.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome. Welcome, everybody.
Gordon, the last time we spoke, you were off to China.
I was off to China. Yes, that's right.
Oh, what happens? Could you tell?
Well, it was a really interesting trip. I mean, whiskey in China is hugely popular, and Tamdu was out there with a Tamdu hat on, doing really, really well. But the market is definitely a little bit not as it was. I think we're seeing that across the world at the moment. A softening of, we just need to see what's going on in the world, and people are hanging on to their money, and we're all doing it. So the whiskey industry in China has always been on this sort of trajectory, which could be massive and never quite achieved that, but it's always slight, but now it seems a little flat at the moment. But things will change and we'll get back into it. But it's just the nature of the economies going on around the world.
Well, I've got a little question there. You've touched on it last week, but could you say, is it difficult now as we go into the 21st century? Do different markets like different whiskies? Could you say, certainly from my historical perspective, in the old days, the Americans liked it lighter, a softer style of Scotch whiskey. Can you say that about markets, China and?
I think it's getting less relevant now. But I mean, certainly 15 odd years ago, I don't think you were selling a lot of peated whiskey in that part of the world. It doesn't necessarily suit their palate. But then again, you now see the rise of the peated whiskey because of the popularity in Islay. Sherry casks. I mean, you think of Asia, you think of sherry casks, you think of, Glengoyne's 21s, 25s, Tamdus, and all the other great sherry cask whiskies out there. So, but then again, also now bourbon casks are popular. Bourbon cask matured whiskey is really, really good too.
Yes.
So I think it's getting less sort of, whiskey's such a wide option for, and not just talking about Scotch, all whiskies. I think the rise of distilleries out there as well in Asia has made people try more things, and we've seen it all over. So yeah, I think it's probably less relevant, but I think if you said there's one thing, they love sherry casks.
Okay, yeah. And I take it would love Tamdu. Gordon, that brings me on to what are we drinking? And I can go first. I don't know what I was reading this week. I was just reading a bit of research, and I came out, just talking about Scottish oak and why we talk about, we just mentioned Tamdu, the sherry casks, it's American oak or European oak, Albert or Quercus robur. And I have, in my hand, some Glengoyne that was matured in Scottish oak, that we acquired some Scottish oak.
Was it not finished in that, or was it fully matured?
I thought it was fully matured, but certainly this is batch A. The first batch was fully matured. I can stand corrected for aficionados of every release that we've got. 15-year-old. It may just be finished, but Scottish oak, Gordon, I've heard that question a few times with all the forests and all the wildernesses in Scotland. Why don't we use more Scottish oak in whiskey?
Well, there's not that much of it, and we can't keep cutting it down. But I think one thing somebody once said to me is that Scottish oak's it can produce quite a spicy style. I'm not sure on that. I've never really drunk a Scottish oak whiskey.
Oh, keep some for you. Yep, there's a bit of spice there. Right at the back of the palate there, gripping onto the tongue. I've actually never tasted that whiskey. So I'll keep some for you. But of course, in Scotland, again, a question I get asked by a lot of people coming is, why are you clearing the land of all the trees? And at the moment, it's a sort of reforestation going on, trying to take the invasive species that arrived 50, 60 years ago, the big fir trees from Scandinavia, trying to get them off the land and replace them with traditional Scottish indigenous trees.
Oak, like oak. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe
for sure.
Up the 100 years we can make.
Well, I mean, it's trying to get away from the faster growing oak or trees that you harvest and use for wood and things, and getting some of those traditional, as you say, deciduous trees back into the landscape. Because the old Scottish forests that you used to hear about were all massive oak trees and those types of trees. So it's really important Really, really important.
Maybe not the heat in Scotland. It's maybe too moist as well, which seems to, as Alistair was saying on their tour of Clydesides, this moisture in Scotland is playing a bit of havoc with the barley in 2023.
It is. It's not looking good for barley this year in terms of its sort of yield it's going to deliver and things like that. Just going back to the Scottish Oak, also, I do remember that I think White Mackay have done something with Scottish Oak recently.
Yeah.
I remember reading about that. Greg Glass has been doing some interesting stuff on Scottish Oak. So maybe we'll see some more Glengoyne on Scottish Oak in Scottish Oak in the future. But I'm sure Greg Glass has been doing something at White and Mackay.
Well, that brings us, I suppose, into what are you drinking, and is there any news as well at the beginning of the show, just to have a little look as we're recording at the end of August 2023, beginning of September 2023.
Has there been any? Well, I am drinking. I'm literally picked up the nearest thing to me, which is a teapot dram. I'm drinking teapot dram number 6, which is what I've got here. I just thought I'd pick it up, literally off the shelf, because I've not prepared particularly well for this.
It's unscripted
podcast, but it is unscripted.
We'll have to mention there's other whiskies out there, but
there are many other whiskies out there. But no, it's lovely whiskey, and big, powerful, first fill European oak, bish bash bosh, lovely. So enjoying that European oak, Spanish oak, not Scottish.
Whiskey news, and just what you mentioned in this last week, Billy Walker's in the papers saying that Glenallachie growth over 20 million this year, and the man who celebrates 50 years in the industry last year puts it down to the bullish markets in the Far East. South Korea, China,
sure.
You mentioned, Taiwan, Singapore, and also looking to Vietnam, and strong sales in Sydney. So it might be flattening off this year, but certainly last year, where these figures come from, Glenallachie and a lot of others doing very well.
Yes, no, absolutely. And Tamdoo's been doing really well too because of Asia as well as other markets. But I think we're just seeing that slight, is just, a little bit, we'll see. But I think it's maybe just not, it's maybe 5% less of what it was. But the other thing that caught my eye this week is there's this brilliant Distillers One of One auction, which is this fabulous sort of, create something unique for people to invest in, and there's this one of one auction is it's all about the sort of to support the distillers charity, so what the Youth Action Fund as well. So it's a really, really good thing. We've donated some Rosebanks, but I was really interested by one or two of the whiskies that have been donated by Brorers. Donated a beautiful sort of unique decanter, unique display, and also Bowmore have donated something as well. So it's just really good to see for charity these one-off whiskies being produced, genuinely one-off whiskies, which are going to garner a huge interest and, of course, deliver a huge amount of money for charity, which is great.
Oh, that's nice. Check that out.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be held by, I think you just type Distillers One of One auction, you'll find all the information you need to. But if anybody has a few £100,000 in their pocket, I'm sure there's a whiskey there for you.
Oh, yeah. The other piece of news, speaking of hundreds of thousands of pounds, just as we mentioned last episode of Gordon Macphail stopping doing their independent bottling, they're only bottling for spirit that they make, they are releasing the Recollection series as well. So what a warehouse they've got. For example, it's a 1981 Port Ellen, £10,000 if you can get it. Glenmore from 73, Banff as well from 76. Extraordinary. So as you were saying, Gordon Macphail selling off some of their age stocks, and it's magnificent. And
well, I mean, it does get to a point is, why are you keeping aged whiskey? Let's be very honest. People go, it's all about when you realize the potential of your stocks of whiskey. And Gordon Macphail has some of the oldest, but as we know, older doesn't always mean better. And secondly, alcohol strength drops, so it could drop below being a whiskey. It gets to the point, and I think they've got some ridiculously old whiskies. It gets to the point, we can't just keep holding them on. We can't just keep hanging on to these. We've got to do something with them. And I think that's ultimately a lot to do with the decision, is that they're going to, in my view, probably sell some of these whiskies, realize some of that potential, producing brilliant whiskies, and then use it to build up their distilleries and maybe acquire a third distillery. I'm sure that's the grand plan, which is great.
On that point, Gordon, you mentioned about if it falls below a certain strength,
yes,
it's not whiskey. So holding old whiskey, it's not just a simple equation of I hold on to it longer and then I'll sell it. It's going to be lots of money. That's a real big issue.
No, I mean, imagine if Gordon, you got a cask on your birthday. Your actual birthday. So that was what, 35 years ago?
Correct. Yes. Just keep it that. Yeah.
Maybe a bit older than that, but say it's whatever age, and you knew you had it, and you've been keeping it, and you go, I'm just going to keep it. I'm just going to keep it. I'm just going to keep it. I'm going to keep it. And you go and you visit the distillery, and it's 40 years old, and you have a taste of it. Oh, that's lovely. It's 39.9% alcohol. It's not now a whiskey. So this is the kind of thing, it gets to the point, if you've got good whiskey, it's old, you actually have to, there's no point in hanging on to it necessarily. It probably won't get better. Some of them probably won't get better, and the strength will continue to drop. So there's lots of things to consider about old whiskey, and I'm sure Gordon and Macphail, I don't know their stock profile, but I'm sure they've got some really old whiskies where they've just said, we actually need to start releasing these.
Another bit of news I picked up was just the Isle of Harris seemed to be going from strength. They're going to double the size of the enterprise up there.
They're launching their single malt very soon, I think.
I think yes, end of this month, or September 23rd. It says I don't know how you pronounce it. The Hirach will be on sale end of September, the official launch day.
The good people involved up there. They've produced a great, I think they're very well known for their gin and particularly the bottle, and we'll see how the whiskey is, but good people involved up there. So that's good to hear, and excited by that. And the other thing that I was actually on Tyree at the weekend, and I went to Tyree Distillery, which is a gin distillery predominantly, but I think they're looking at doing whiskey. So that was really interesting. Had a wee gin and tonic, very nice. And Isle of Coll, which is just north of Tyree, has a distillery as well. So all these little micro distilleries everywhere, really, really interesting. So it was an interesting weekend. The other thing that I noticed is that there's quite a lot of new releases out there at the moment. We've come to that sort of end of the summer, sort of, and that's when you're sort of just finalizing things. A lot of releases happen in September, October, not so many in November and December, because that's such a busy time. So people always should be aware, releases generally are happening, and if you want to hear about new whiskies, September's generally when you'll hear more. Yeah. Speaking of which, our friends at Macallan have launched a new travel retail series as well called the Colours Collection, I believe. Saw it in Heathrow last night as I was delayed on my way home from London. Very nice. I mean, I don't know much about the whiskies, but completely redesigned Macallan packaging. So have a look at it. I think one of the things about releases, new releases, these types of things is, there's so many of them now, but there's some really good ones. Let's really dig through them and find out the good ones. So we're going to bring you, our listeners, our opinions of some of the best releases coming out, not just from Glengoyne, Tamdhu and Rosebank and Smokehead, but other people too.
We'll do that next episode. I was just about to ask that question, but we'll park that for the next episode of Whisky Unscripted. Price points, what to look out for. Should you go for age, not age?
One more. What's your favourite number?
Favourite number? I'll go 8.
Really? Is it? Really?
Yes.
Well, Bat Strength number 8 has just come out from Tamdhu, and there is one of those wonderful whiskies. So if you like the Tamdhu Bat Strength series, number 8 is out. So you can find that in your specialist retail store, probably online or from tamdhu.com. Thank you. Sales pitch over. No more.
But yeah, I'd love to get into all that new release. Let's do that the next time I'm going to a whiskey shop tomorrow. I'll be all over that. I'll bring my recording device. Another small piece of news which really transitioned me to a little feature is I was doing a bit of research for Rosebank Distillery. And, looking over it and worked out that, yes, a gentleman called James Rankin does indeed start up Rosebank Distillery in 1840 in the lowlands of Scotland, in a town called Falkirk. The area's called Camelin. What I didn't really realise, Gordon, was almost a stone's throw away was another distillery, actual called Camelin Distillery, face to face, looking at each other. And I know that because in 1864, James Rankin of Rosebank buys it. They go bust. He buys Camelin and turns it into the maltings. Now, I was thinking, that's quite interesting. Up until 1864, whenever it went bust, they must have been looking at each other through the windows, opening the curtains and like, maybe they're best of friends. I don't know. But it got me thinking of other distilleries side by side with different owners in Scotland.
With different owners?
Yes, because automatically, I know what you're going to say, Glenfiddich.
Well, same owners.
Well, Dalveny. Or Caninvie.
Caninvie, yeah.
So they're all the same owners. I'll leave that out.
Depends what you mean side by side.
Well, sort of neighbours.
So like Isla's an obvious one. There's a whole load of distilleries that are owned by different people that are side by side. Some of them. There's 3 on the south of the island, isn't there?
Are they in visual distance of each other?
Not really. No, they're about a mile apart. So maybe not. That's a bit further apart. That's fair. I'm sure that, as you say, if you look in history, there must have been so many.
Well, you've just mentioned it already with the release of cask batch Strength 8. Tamdhu is literally about 7 iron from Knockandow.
It is a 7 iron from Knockandow. That's exactly right. They are genuinely pretty much side by side.
Yes, that's a quite good one.
That's very interesting.
Well, there's also a village. If you're driving between Craigellachie and Elgin.
Would that be where Chegwin was from?
This is a very obscure reference. No, you're thinking of Keith. No. I thought you might know of Rothes, Chegwin.
Rothes you're talking about?
Rothes, yeah. I don't often research.
There's a lot of distilleries in Rothes.
4. And
is there only 4?
Well, Glen Grant, if you're driving through Rothes, you pass Glen Rothes as well. I think Glen Rothes is on the right. Glen Grant was on the left. With
and just so everybody knows, Glen Rothes Distillery is not in the place called Glen Rothes.
That's right. So Glen Grant, very close. I mean, there must be, if it's not a 7 iron, it's maybe a 5 iron. But Glen Grant, owned by the Campari Group, Glen Rothes, obviously by Edrington. And further up, I think, as you're heading out, you've got Speyburn and Glen Spey in Rothes. I didn't know much about Glen Spey, so I had to look it up. It was Diageo owns Glen Spey, and Speyburn, of course, owned by Glenlivet. And I've got a Speyburn, Speyburn on age statement.
Yes.
So and then I thought, is that the closest in Rothes in Scotland? And I thought,
is it?
I don't know. I want people listening to this podcast to get onto the maps of Scotland. I looked at Carron as well. Not the lady that works in the office, but the actual Carron.
Home of what was Imperial, now Dalmunnoch.
And there's one quite close there, but I don't know if it's as close as
Dalhuen.
Yes,
it's about 3 miles away.
Yeah, that's maybe a drive and a.
Then you've obviously got there's probably a few. How far apart's Glen Scotia and Springbank? They're pretty close to each other, aren't they?
I never looked down that. This is an unscripted part of the show, Gordon. But I just thought, along with Mr. Rankin and Camelin Distilleries in the early 1860s, looking at each other, one will subsume the other. So it was just neighbourhood distilleries owned by different companies. And at the moment,
I bet you Glen Scotia is pretty close to Springbank. But yeah, no, absolutely.
That could be the big one.
Just looked up on the map. About that's probably a good drive in a 3-wood. But yeah. Not far. Oh, it's very interesting.
It's just a very interesting part of it. And I'm sure if you go back in history, there'll be more. But at the moment, which ones are?
Anybody else drop us a line? Our email box is full, but we will make sure we empty
it. Coming up in the show, we mentioned in Clydeside Distillery, we've got a film director.
Yes.
Greg Swartz.
Yes, I'm looking forward to hearing from Greg.
It's a great interview. I just had a little listen to just top and tail Mike Brown, who's been on before, joined us on the team.
He's our roving reporter, Michael.
He is gone. So I had a quick look at not whiskey in movies, but movies about whiskey. I just wondered, would you recommend a couple of these? We'll talk shortly about The Water of Life. Greg Swartz, Swartz directs it. The Amber Light, I think you mentioned.
The Amber Light, yeah. Mr. Dave Broom.
Yes.
Dave was heavily involved in this film. Know Dave very well. Big fan of it. Seen it. Really good film. And just, I think, Dave's one of those people, when he starts talking about whiskey, you're just like, I'd just listen to you all day.
Yeah,
he's very, very good. It's definitely one to look out for.
It is definitely one. It's a little bit of the sort of arts and literature comes together with whiskey. He tries to really good. And just as a little side to that, Gordon, do you know the very last scene? They're downstairs in a basement bar in Edinburgh, having a drink, and it's all the people I think it contributed to the film having a drink and talking about whiskey.
Yeah,
I used to do a pub quiz in that bar years ago. It means absolutely nothing to this podcast or Dave Broom, but I used to do pub quizzes. I used to be the host.
Did you?
And that used to be the brought in basement.
Come up with some pub quiz questions.
Oh, well, we'll do that.
What was the top? You must remember one question that always got everybody in a pub quiz. Believe
it or not, it's quite grisly for this podcast, but I used to do quite a lot with serial killers. It was always quite interesting. What do
you mean you did quite a lot with serial? What does that mean? Did you go and kill with them, or?
The quiz questions, like for example.
Oh right, here I love serial killers.
What was the first serial killer? He was just a killer. The first killer caught by the new invention of the telephone. Now this is just totally off my top. It's not a telephone or telegram. So
Jack the Ripper. He was never caught, was he?
Caught. No. It's just you've asked me. This is about 30 years ago. So Dr. Crippen gets on a boat, and Dr. Crippen was a murderer in Britain, and they sort of telegram to catch him at the other end of when he gets off the boat. So
have there been any killer sort of stories in the whiskey industry? Anybody who was suspiciously murdered in the distillery suddenly came to whatever? Have you ever heard any stories like that in your research?
Well, of course, even closer to, we're drinking Glengoyne at the moment. Glengoyne had a distillery manager called Cochrane Cartwright, who sadly passed away in the 28th of October, 1899. And there is suspicions of suicide, suspicions he was drinking too much and fell down. But was he pushed? Whatever happens, he's found dead. He's said to be the ghost of Glengoyne. So it's
is that you being a tabloid writer there, just trying to create a story for? Okay, fair enough. Good.
That's right. But that's exactly what the next part of the podcast is going to be about.
So interesting.
I'm going to hold that out there. So the other movies apart from the Amber Light, Scotch the Golden Dram, which
I've not seen that.
We featured on this podcast, believe it or not, Series 2 or Series 3. We played
I've not seen it. I don't think I've seen it.
I think Robbie's in it, Robbie Hughes.
No, I'm definitely not going to see it.
And when I was doing this, the story of whiskey, Scotch, the story with David Heyman, more of a television.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah, that was good.
That was good. Yeah. A lot of people in that one. And you've mentioned them already, Macallan. I hadn't seen this before, and it's worth a look. It's called Macallan, the Spirit of 1926, the Janet Harbinson story. Janet Harbinson, or Nettie, as she was called, took over Macallan. 1926 and ran it as a woman, which in those days was unheard of, and she really is revealed and revered by Macallan as being one of the saviours of the whiskey. So it's an 8-minute movie about her life, starring Bill Patterson, who's big actor, music by Simple Minds, and it's a big stars in it. It's amazing. It's a really big Hollywood production.
I'm looking forward to that.
So that's very good.
Good.
But we're going to hear from the director of The Water of Life. It's a great interview. Hopefully you're going to enjoy this. But before we do, Gordon, this is what you're talking about, fiction getting in the way of our facts.
Yep.
You watch a lot of movies?
Yeah.
You're obviously a man in the whiskey world that makes decisions. Do you think you can make a decision on some movie pitches? I've got two.
Right.
So I'm going to put you and anybody listening in the seat of Netflix commissioner.
Okay.
I've done this before, believe it or not. In my radio past, I have to put pitches together and go in there. And I remember memorably, it was a television pitch, and the guy says, "This is really good. It's really good, Gordon." But the guys that write for Ant and Dec were in here an hour ago, and they had 3 times the amount of pitches and they were twice as good. I thought, okay, bye. Go for a pint. Anyway, so here's the pitch. What would make the best movie? I'm going to take you back. I'm going to do it 2 or 3 minutes in each one. I just want a quick yeah or nay and why you think, or how you think it could be made better, or why it would be good. So here we go. I'm going to take you back to the early 19th century. The year is 1810. We're going to start the movie in Loch Lomond in Scotland. The Royal Navy press gang. This is a few years earlier. Press gang, a chap called James Gilfillan, which means they grab him, kidnap him, and put him on a boat on the Royal Navy. For the next 3 or 4 years, James Gilfillan is on board a Royal Navy vessel fighting the wars of Napoleon and the European, much against his will. In 1809, he's moored just off of Portsmouth. His friends are saying, don't do it. Darkness falls. James jumps into the water, swims ashore. He then walks 460 miles all the way from Portsmouth to Killarn, to the little village behind Glengoyne in the Campsie Hills. He probably walked more than that because you cannot walk as the crow flies. This was a capital offence to go AWOL from the British Navy. You've been strung up, hung immediately. So why doesn't he get turned in? How does he survive one of the greatest, I think, evasion of all time, greatest feats of evasion? I know what he does. When he gets to Scotland, he becomes a master distiller. In my film, he's sitting, educating and helping the English farmers turn grain into spirit. And if they're already doing it, he's making it better. He's using his distilling skill to keep alive. He gets to Killarn. The landowners, the justices of the peace, leave him alone. He makes great whiskey. Finally, a new excise officer arrives, tricks him into turning up at the Balfron Sheriff Court in 1810. This is documented. He thinks it's for a minor infraction. No idea the excise are behind it. He's so in with the law, in with the bricks. But he walks into the courtroom, spies some Royal Navy people having coffee, tea and grog in the room. He takes the key out of one of the sheriff officers, locks the Royal Navy people in, comes into the courtroom, and there he sees this excise officer. According to a lot of sources, he grabs the window sash, rips it out. He's a strong man. He's been in the Royal Navy. He then wallops the excise officer, a name called Hosey, over the head with it, and jumps out the window to cheers from the gallery, and he's never seen again. Interestingly enough, a Moses Gilfillan from the same area. Is it him? Is it his brother? A Moses Gilfillan turns up in America, in Massachusetts, and Moses' son, James, another James Gilfillan, became Secretary of State in the American presidential under the Hayes and Garfield. An amazing story of survival and using distillation to survive. What do you think, Gordon? Is it?
It's not a comedy, is it?
No.
Well, I'm not gonna give you a view until I've heard the second one.
Okay, but it's up there. I'm not getting shown the door yet, am I?
No. You're still sitting in the seat with your feet dangling off the edge. Yeah, carry on.
Okay. That's the first pitch. Here's my.
What are you going to call the film? Gilfillan 1.
I like that. See, you always say that to the person.
I want to know what the next one in the franchise will be. So anyway, carry on.
Okay. My final pitch before we go to Greg Swartz and hear about his film, The Water of Life. Here is a movie pitch, Gordon. This deals with one of the most famous buccaneering whiskey showmen. I give you The Greatest Showman. I give you Tommy Dewar, the movie. Tommy Dewar, a Scotsman from Perth, arrives Euston Station, 1887. He's hanging off the train, itching to get going. He lands on the platform. He's got a piece of paper in his hands. It's the only 2 contacts he knows in London. He's setting up office. He then goes round to the contacts. One's dead and the other's bankrupt. Gone. The paper's ripped up. He's on his own in London. His office landlord wants the money up front. He wants a month in advance. He doesn't think this guy will be around for very much longer. So 1887, Tommy Dewar sets to work in London. He has a huge, wonderful personality, and it's not long before he starts getting the deals coming in. Not as much as maybe his great rival, James Buchanan of Black and White. So in 1892, he decides there's nothing else for it. He's going to get on a boat at Southampton and go round the world. For the next 2.5 years, he goes around 26 countries, signs up over 32 agents, and had his order book filled. This was before the age of the jet plane. All those wonderful ocean liners, trains. And 1 year before that trip, Andrew Carnegie, the great American industrialist, born in Dunfermline, wrote to him saying, could you send some whiskey over? Dewar sends whiskey over to Andrew Carnegie, who becomes one of the biggest philanthropists in the world. It's meant for the president. It's a gift. Tommy Dewar goes to the White House in his trip around the world and talks to the president about his whiskies in your cellar. This man, truly amazing. In 1893, he gets a royal warrant. So we've got sort of Buckingham Palace in the movie as well. We've got Queen Victoria, who maybe will be amused when Tommy Dewar pops up there. His great friend, Tommy Lipton, he of the Tea Empire. They own horses. They race in the Derby. They own yachts. They race the America's Cup. They're very friendly with Bertie, Queen Victoria's eldest son, who will go on to become Henry VII. Tommy Dewar owns the second motor car in the UK. Nice scene about this newfangled device Tommy can drive. And of course, as they move office to near Waterloo Bridge, he erects Europe's biggest neon sign, a 68-foot high Scottish Highlander wearing a kilt, 10,000 neon bulbs with a moving arm that has a glass of whiskey in it. It is a wonder of the world. In London, of Sherlock Holmes, fog, and this is an amazing piece of architecture. Tommy himself was a great one for Dewarisms. Keep advertising, and advertising will keep you. He was a genius of advertising, so much so that in 1898, he produces the world's first commercial. You've seen Apple, you've seen Audi, you've seen IKEA. Every commercial ever been can trace its back story to Tommy Dewar, the first commercial screened in a rooftop in New York to an amazing acclaim. Story of our ancestors, dancing Scotsman, Dewar's whiskey. So there we go. 1904, by the way, did you know this? He takes out the longest residency at the Savoy. He's got a room from 1904 to 1930.
Really?
Sheriff of London, yes.
Jeez,
and my last little fact, bit of humour in there. We could throw a bit of romance on those ocean liners going across 26 countries. We could maybe do that. But Harry Lauder, one of the great Scottish showmen of his time, was a bit of a meanie, didn't like spending money, asked Tommy Dewar for some pigeons, because Tommy had lots of pigeons. Harry Lauder took them back to Scotland, back to Edinburgh, put them in the pigeon loft. Next day, of course, they were back to London. They were homing pigeons. So, bit of humour. We'll try and get a bit of romance in there. The ultimate showman. Gordon, it's James Gilfillan. Daring do. It's Tommy Dewar, the greatest showman. Hugh Jackman starring.
I mean, they're both good pitches. They're both very factual heavy. But for me, there's more potential and more money to be made from Tommy Dewar. So I'm gonna allow you to do me a pilot for that one, and we'll have. But no, I think Tommy Dewar's story is absolutely brilliant. He really was a huge character, and instrumental in setting up the Scottish whisky industry as it is. So huge, yet definitely Tommy Dewar for me.
Well, that was just to whet our appetite for this brilliant interview from a really, really good film. And we've got a trailer from that film, from The Water of Life, and you hear voices of Jim McEwen, Mark Rainier, Charles MacLean, Joel Harris and Rachel Barry, Neil Ridley. Have a listen to this, Gordon. Take it away, and take it away, Mike, afterwards.
My mum used to say, "Did you go to school today?" I say, "Yep." She said, "Come here." And she's smelling. I know. You've been in that damn distillery again. Bed, no dinner.
Ancient, natural, old, pure.
The blood of one small nation, absolutely. In the mid-1970s, Scotch whisky ceased to be fashionable when it became Dad's drink.
There was just a massive bust.
I've never once met anyone who goes, and there's no emotion behind it. If you do that, God, go and drink vodka.
even though I'm a scientist, it's actually much, much more of an art.
Looking at Bruichladdich, I said someday I would love to make whiskey at that distillery.
The place was falling apart. There was a sign. It sort of encompasses the whole whiskey industry at the time. Exclamation. And I can remember thinking, I've got to do something about it.
I got a phone call from the chairman of Bruichladdich. I said, the answer is yes. He said, really?
Very different people with different background and experience who all came together with the same goal of bringing this distillery back to life.
The most unlikely partnership in the history of whiskey.
It's hysterical. Jim revelled in the freedom that he was given, sometimes a little too much.
I could make virtually what I wanted.
There's a Bruichladdich every week, wasn't it? There's probably too many.
I said, why are you doing this? And he looked at me with his wild eyes and said, because we can, and because we're having fun.
There aren't as many true mavericks anymore, learning quite literally from scratch.
Mark and I had many battles. We detonated.
Yeah, emotionally, it cost me a lot.
But we did it. We touched the void. Oh my God. How far can we go, you know?
I'm Mike Brown, roving reporter, and I'm joined today by a very special guest, critically acclaimed director and screenwriter, Greg Swartz. Greg, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks. I'm glad to be here.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. Greg, most important question of the day, what are you drinking?
I am drinking a 2005 vintage Balblair. It is a discontinued because they moved away from vintages, 10-year-old, and it's early, but it's in the glass.
Where are you joining us from today, and what time is it over there?
It's 10 a.m. here. I'm on the east coast of the U.S. in Pennsylvania. I live in Los Angeles, but I'm on holidays right now. So,
absolutely, as you can tell from the glass, you're on holiday, definitely for sure. I have got here a wee smokehead. We've actually just launched this. It is our tequila cask, so it's been rested in a añejo tequila cask between 8 to 12 months. And I'm just going to pour myself a wee dram just now as well. It's not early where I am in Edinburgh. So, Greg, you are a filmmaker, screenwriter, whiskey drinker. Tell me, how did it all begin? Where does Greg start his filmmaking career?
Well, my filmmaking career sort of, I think, probably began when I was a tiny little kid. Honestly, this sounds so cliche, but the truth is, my first movie I fell in love with was the original Star Wars.
Oh,
and
amazing.
I wanted to be a Jedi, and that wasn't viable. So then I sort of looked at the filmmaking side of things. But I got away from that a bit. When I went to university, I didn't go to film school. I actually was an English major, literature major, and journalism. And I became a journalist for a number of years. But the pull of the silver screen yanked me back, and I moved to California and enrolled in screenwriting school there. So,
which Star Wars out of interest, or is it just too hard to pick?
No, it was, well, I mean, the thing that really, it was all of them in order, you know.
Yeah.
But I think the best one is Empire Strikes Back.
Oh, yeah, okay, absolutely. Fantastic.
It had the coolest sets, the great plot, great lines. It's kind of dark. Lando Calrissian made his first appearance.
Oh, what a character with the cape as well. Just completely necessary. Fantastic. Nice. I think the next interview I do, I might dress up as a Jedi for this then. In terms of whiskey then, so where did that begin? You've made an amazing movie, Water of Life. Features lots of kind of, I think infamous is probably the best way to explain them. People in the industry, Jim McEwen, Mark Rainier, absolutely amazing characters. But you are in Pennsylvania, or you're in Hollywood. How do you end up in Scotland, and how do you end up making a movie about whiskey?
Well, my whiskey journey didn't begin in Pennsylvania or in California. It began in Glasgow, Scotland.
Nice.
I was an exchange student in Glasgow for a year in college.
Oh, wow.
And that was really where it began. The first time I ever really seriously drank whiskey was in the Bon Accord.
Amazing bar.
And one of the other students, one of the Scottish students I was at Glasgow, Caledonia, and one of the students there took me there, and me and my friend, and he's sort of built a flight for us of different whiskeys from different regions. And that was the beginning of a long, slow slide into,
it's a whiskey. Fun slide though, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Fantastic. What was your first dram? Do you remember?
Well, no, I don't. Okay. The first dram that I like really kind of, because I'm sure I had some blends and stuff. I was a student, I'm sure I was drinking some really low end blends. I used to drink a lot of Bells because I have family. Well, I have family who are named Bell, and so it was just a novelty to me, And but my first, I bought the first bottle of single malt I ever bought was a Glenlivet.
Nice, amazing.
Of a 12-year-old, and I was 19, so I could drink in Glasgow. But then when I came back to the States, I couldn't drink. But I brought that bottle back with me, and it was this sort of trophy. I did drink. Don't get me wrong. I just wasn't legally allowed to drink.
It's such a juxtaposition because obviously in the UK, people start drinking obviously much, much earlier. That's interesting, isn't it? Do you think that people have different drinking habits in America as opposed to the UK?
Well, I think it's worse because it makes it, by making it prohibitive, it makes it secret. And, not just me, all of my friends and I were drinking as teenagers. We just had to be secretive about it. It didn't stop us from drinking. It just made it harder.
Totally.
And teenagers are very good at getting around that. And the best way to get around to it was I got on an airplane in New York City and I wasn't old enough to drink, and I got off at Heathrow and I was.
That's so surreal. Nice. And you're saying, so Glenlivet 12 was like your first eureka moment where you thought this is really, really good?
Yeah. I mean, for sure, that was the first single malt I ever had. And that was, at the time, this is in the 90s, there wasn't a huge amount of options. There was nowhere near what there are now. Nowhere near. 1% probably, so.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember drinking Glenfiddich, but the ones that were just the easy ones to find, Glenmorangie.
Of course.
But I never did any deep dives back then, at least not that were driven by me. I remember being given my first Lafroig because Lafroig is such a whiskey, which I love. Don't get me wrong,
it's an instant, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're a filmmaker, or you're kind of passionate about making filmmaking. You're in Glasgow. You're getting into whiskey. Where does the water of life begin in your brain, in your mind?
It's funny. 2017 was my 10th wedding anniversary. My wife had never been to Scotland, so we went for our 10th anniversary. And there's a thing in Dufton called the Speyside Whiskey Walk. It's a hike, and you hike from one distillery to another. And while we were on that hike, we were outside of Glenfiddich, and the roof was off the still house because they were lowering in new stills. It was a huge crane and lowering in all the pieces of the still. And I remember standing there, watching that, thinking, I want to tell the story of how whiskey's made. And then the film morphed a bit. It's not a how-to, you've seen the film. It's not about how to make it. There's not a chart in there about, then you add this and you do.
Yeah.
But that was the original, impetus was right then and there, was like, there's a really interesting story about the behind the scenes of this, not just because, people know how wine is made because, well, it wasn't me who said this. Someone said, people don't make wine, God makes wine. You just let it sit and it does its own thing. But, whiskey's heavily influenced by the maker.
Yeah, of course.
So, it's really that. It was 2017 outside of Glenfiddich.
Amazing. That's really, really cool. And so you start then getting a group of your friends that are also filmmakers together. And then you begin to try and tell the story. And I'm guessing it's sort of, it kind of organically unfurls itself and begins to start telling itself almost.
Yeah, sort of. Our cinematographer is a good friend of mine and he's very into whiskey. I'm actually in his house as we speak.
Nice.
And a few floors below me in his basement is his sort of personal whiskey bothy. And I approached him about this and I said, we started looking for the people together. We knew we wanted to tell the story, but we wanted to find the people. And we were sort of researching, reading, watching YouTube, looking around. And I knew a lot about the whiskeys, but I didn't know a lot about the individuals yet. And he and I kind of built a list of, I don't know, I'm making this up, 18 people that we liked. And then from there, we kind of winnowed that down and,
and tried to kind of tell their individual stories. And that's really, really great. And so when it comes to the beginnings of making a movie, and you start kind of going into Islay, and you start going to these other distilleries in Scotland, how long does the process of actually making the movie take? Is it a quick process?
Well, the shooting is well, although it was what it was went to 4 little shoots. Well, 1 bigger one and 3 smaller ones. But we went to Scotland 3 times to do it, and then we also went to Australia. But you know, at the end of the film, spoiler alert, we followed Jim McEwan to Australia to open a distillery there. So and I realized, you know, we had originally planned to go back to Islay to talk to him again, and he said, "Oh, I'm in Australia." And we realized, well, when you're in Los Angeles, it's about the same distance from Islay to LA, LA to Brisbane. So
fantastic. That's great. And then how long does it take to actually kind of do everything in post then? Is that, I'm guessing, that's a much longer process?
Yeah, there's a huge amount of footage. And so our whole team got together and we would take turns going through footage, and we had a sort of a ranking of basically 1, 2, 3 ranking. If anyone wrote a 3 down, I'm the director, so it had to come through me. So anyone who wrote a 3 down, that basically meant, Greg, you must look at this. This is going to be a really important moment. 2 was maybe not important, but interesting or weird or different. And 1 is, in a pinch, it might be worth it. You know, so we had these huge lists, 800-page Word document.
Wow.
And then one of our producers and he and I would sit together and sort of do what's called a paper edit, you know, and start going through the Word document and saying, oh, here he talks about this and she talks about this. And then we go to the footage and start doing it. And we kind of built and ripped it down and built and ripped it down and slowly. And it was probably about a year.
Wow, that's such a long time. And then were you kind of constantly in touch with the distilleries as well, and about how the process was going? Or was it sort of like a kind of secret unfurling of this magical thing you've put together?
Probably more closer to, I mean, we would be in touch with them if we needed something from them.
Yeah, of course.
If we needed a photo of, they talk about some distiller who's been dead for 50 years, who used to work there, we would write to them and they'd send us a photo. Or, you know, in Brookladi's case, they actually gave us a hard drive full of archival photos and videos. And some video. Yeah, mostly photos, though, because they were old.
Yeah, of course. That's great. You must have tried some nice whiskies as well, I'm guessing.
Yeah. That was a really amazing perk of the job, was we got to drink some absolutely incredible.
It's a tough job, isn't it? But there's a lot of research involved, you know. And
I was lucky in that I'm the director, so I didn't have to ever drive, and I had to operate no equipment. So if the distiller was going to talk to me and he was going to drink or she was going to drink, they were going to give me a dram and I was going to drink along with them. But I'm not the one operating, you know, a 2,000 watt light or something. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, totally. There's this great moment in the film, actually, where Jim McEwan, I think it's halfway through the film, he looks like he's been talking for quite a long time, and he just sort of looks down at you, I'm guessing it's you, and says, I think it's time for a wee whiskey. And I think I can actually hear you in the background going, yeah, sure.
Yeah. I said, I think you might be right.
That's right. Absolutely. It's great. It's sort of,
and that was not my idea.
Film. Really?
Yeah, that wasn't my idea. That was our editor's idea, because we removed my voice from the film. You know, there's no narrator in the film. You hear them talking, not me. But our editor was like, let's leave that in. And we watched it and we were all like, yeah, that's kind of fun. You know,
it's really good. It sets the tone, because the thing about whiskey is it's supposed to be fun, right? You know, it's such an amazing craft, and it's an incredible industry. And that's what you've sort of captured amazingly with the film. But at the same time, it's also about, you know, getting friends together, like you say, and sitting around a table and, you know, having that special bottle, playing cards and that sort of thing. And I think the story really, really tells you that sort of picture as well. If you was to work in a distillery, what distillery would it be, and what job would you do in that distillery?
I can do you one better. I did.
Okay. Nice.
Before we shot the film, the Glasgow distillery, we had reached out to them. We wanted to do we tried to get a cross section of distilleries: old, new, north, south, east, west, big, small. You know, just a huge variety. And we wanted to feature a couple new ones, and Glasgow Distillery was a new one. And not only did they say they'd love to participate, they invited me to go work there.
Oh, amazing.
So I worked there for 1 week. That's all I did, 1 week. But I followed a mash from the first day we mashed in. And on the final day, we filled 12 casks. and we followed it all through the washbacks, first distillation, second distillation, everything. I even made gin in the afternoons because
nice.
And I'm actually very proud to say what I did after the film was done. I bought one of the 12 casks that I made, and now that has matured into whiskey. So I actually own one of the casks that I made.
Made it yourself. Fantastic. That's so great. I mean, I love working in distilleries because you get a real different picture of what the actual operation is like. I mean, it's one thing drinking whiskey, but there's another thing moving barrels and moving casks and seeing the wash going in, and the smells of a distillery will stay with you, I think, forever. And those memories that you associate with them, that's what you do when you go back to that glass and you drink that whiskey, which is why I love it. What's your desert island whiskey?
Black Art 4.1.
Oh, the 4 times distilled, I believe. Almost blew the roof.
No, that's the X4. I actually have a bottle of that. I have a bottle of X4 plus 10, which is the 10-year-old aged X4.
Wow.
The Black Art 4.1 is the black bottle. In the opening credits of the movie, you see whiskeys being poured. That's a 4.1, and I've actually had that bottle. Our crew drank that bottle. But it was not only is it one of my favorite whiskeys I've ever tried, probably my favorite whiskey I've ever tried. It's also it's the one that Jim McEwan is most proud of.
Yeah. And
it forever is connected to the movie with me because we had that on set, and it was the last Black Art he ever made.
Oh wow! So that's a real memories attached to it, and that's fantastic. I'd love to try and even smell that whiskey, but it's not going to happen.
No, every now and then you find drams of it in pubs and stuff.
Yeah,
available. I mean, they're not cheap anymore because it's such a rare bird. But I was just on Isla in June, and the Lucci's in Bowmore, they had it on the menu, and I mean, I think it was like 80 pounds a dram, but it was there.
Oh, nice.
And there's older Black Arts I've never had. So
yeah, of course. And now that the rains are off, and you've got the different production that are involved in Bruichladdich, they're making their own version of it, I'm guessing, with their own recipes as well.
Yeah, they're on version 10 out now, and 11 will come out next month. I think September is when they release the Black Art. So yeah, so Jim made 1 through 4.
Yeah,
and then Adam Hannett has made 5 through 10, and will soon be 11. And I've actually tasted the 11.
Oh, amazing! It's really nice to have that within the movie itself. You sort of have this overriding arc of kind of old teachers passing on the kind of to the next generation the torch, which I really love about it as well. There must be some funny stories from the set, I'm guessing.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it was it's funny because Bruichladdich, 2 distilleries in particular. I mean, every distillery was wonderful to us, but two of them went so far above and beyond. And it was Springbank at Bruichladdich, where they were very sort of hands off. They just said, whatever you guys need. And they let us fly our drone through the warehouse.
Oh,
which was kind of cool. But the second day at Bruichladdich, there was a cross draft in the warehouse, in a palletized warehouse, and the drone clipped the metal of it just enough. Drone propellers are disposable. Like they break all the time. They're meant to be, because if they weren't disposable and super soft, they would be super deadly.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So the drone clipped the pallet, snapped the prop off, so the drone just dropped, and Jim McEwan was walking underneath it at the time. It did not hit him. It didn't even come that close to hitting it. But it was that was a pretty inauspicious beginning to think.
If that was to actually hit him, I would imagine there would be a limited edition release of Bruichladdich about that drone hitting him or something like that.
They would have called it the drone, or they would have like the Yellow Submarine kind of stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. Fantastic. Oh, that's great. And so you've made the movie now, and it premiered. I think it was premiered last year. Was it 2001?
Yeah. Well, we had to launch a movie into the pandemic, which was not easy. Or, we kind of did a lot of staggered release. We did some online events with Jim and with other distillers, with David Stewart and Charles McLean, and that was really cool. And then I don't know if you're familiar with PBS. It's a network here, the public broadcast system. It's owned by the people. Those stations own them. That's the best documentary platform in the US, and they invited us to do a TV screening series on there. So that was last year. And now we've actually made a 10-minute longer extended cut that is on our people can rent on our website because
Ooh, nice.
PBS made us get the movie below 90 minutes because that's like the broadcast window. So we made a version that's 10 minutes longer that's available on our website. And,
I will have to look
that has a couple other distilleries back into it that aren't in the shorter cut.
Oh, nice, nice. I will absolutely have to look into that. So how was the reception for the film been in terms of I suppose the States and also in Scotland as well?
It's been amazing. It's been in the whiskey world, it's absolutely just been phenomenal. On one hand, on PBS, millions of people have seen it, and that's really cool. But on the other hand, thousands of whiskey people have seen it, and that is kind of even more rewarding directly. We did a screening there's a whiskey festival in Vancouver, and we did a screening at the whiskey festival there. It's called the Hopscotch Festival. Nice. It's hops and scotch. It's a beer and whiskey festival.
I see what they did there. Very good.
So we were at the Hopscotch Festival. They put us in a theater that held 700 people, and it sold out.
Amazing.
And Bruichladdich was participating in the whiskey festival, and they gave everybody in the audience a dram of Octomore in a little, a 25 ml bottle.
Fantastic.
And we told the audience when to open the whiskey at that moment in the film. And in the back of the theater, it's like super heavily peated whiskey. So in the back of the room, all of a sudden the entire theater was just smelled like campfire.
It's like the new amazing 4DX experience, except it's with Baltimore instead. That's fantastic. You should have fans on just blowing a cask of ppm going across. That's incredible. So it's been really well received so far. I met you when we was both in Glasgow. We was in the Bath Street Spirit store, and I did a wee tasting for you there. And there was a real buzz around the movie even before you had arrived. There was other people that had mentioned they'd seen the film, they'd seen the premiere, and that sort of thing. And it's a great wee store as well. A big shout out to the staff there. They really do care about whiskey. So you've done the film now. What's next? Is there another film lined up that you're going to do? Have you got the bug for making whiskey movies?
Oh yeah. I am in the process of making 3 other films right now, different stages. But what I will say, the one that I believe you and I spoke about, we had shot a whole huge raft of footage about independent bottling.
Yeah.
And then we wound up using it's in the film, but we felt like not anywhere near enough of it's in the film because it's such a unique animal.
Yeah.
There's no equivalent in wine or food or beer or there's no other equivalent to independent bottling. The closest thing I've ever come, I've been looking for a metaphor for years. The closest thing I've ever come is there's those aftermarket car tuners, like Alpina for BMW, AMG for Mercedes.
Yeah.
In the US, there's Saleen and Cobra. But they're like companies that work, they're trusted partners, and you can buy a Saleen Ford here. Ford makes the car, then Saleen takes it and makes it a Saleen Ford, and then they charge a lot more for it. That's the difference here, because independent bottlers are often a better value. Not, if you do this with cars, it's going to double the price of the car. But back to the independent bottling. So yes,
totally.
One day, the editor and I were working, and we were just chatting while we were working in the edit suite, and I said, we have enough here to make an entire other film out of this. And then we sort of looked at each other and we're like, why don't we? And then, so
here we go again.
We didn't have quite enough to make the film just as it was, but we had the impetus to do it. And then there's one of our partners who I'm co-directing the independent bottling film with. He's based in Gallus Shields.
Fantastic.
So during the pandemic, I could do interviews in the US and he could do them there.
That's
so
great.
We've now built up this archive of independent bottler interviews. And so that film is already in post-production. The plan is going to be to premiere that film in May of next year.
Amazing.
Hopefully in Scotland.
Fantastic.
Where is yet to be determined.
Maybe somewhere in a warehouse or something.
Yeah. I mean, I want to do something creative like that,
of course.
I like the idea of doing it outside, projected against a wall.
That's nice.
And have this sort of, now, the only knock on that is, Scotland's not the most reliable place weather-wise.
I don't know what you're talking about. It's very reliable. 4 seasons in one day.
Yeah.
Are there any kind of independent whiskey clubs? Are there whiskey clubs in the States that are just directed towards Scotch whiskey?
Well, the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society has chapters here.
Yeah.
And I'm a member. But they don't have members' rooms here. What they do is they have they have a term for it, like satellite bars or partner bars. Basically,
of course,
there's one I can walk to in Los Angeles called the Tam O'Shanter, and it was Walt Disney's favorite restaurant.
And love that.
And they have a huge whiskey selections, and we're actually doing an event with them in a couple of weeks where they have a whiskey club, but they are the satellite bar for the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society.
Yeah.
And then they have 700 whiskeys on their own, and then they have a locked cabinet of S&WS whiskeys that you can only buy if you're a member.
Fantastic.
And then once a month they do their outturn tastings there and stuff as well. So there's a lot of those, not so much in Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania has the worst liquor laws in the US, which is saying something.
I've heard that actually, yeah, no, I've done a lot of selling of alcohol in my lifetime. You know, and a lot of people from Pennsylvania say it's impossible to try and buy alcohol for some reason. And is it correct in thinking you have to buy it from the state or something like that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's
and when I was growing up here, the state it wasn't just state owned stores. It was like, it looked like you were going to like get your driver's license. Like it was state workers. They had shirts and ties on. They'd be behind a sort of plexiglass, like you were dealing with a government official. It was very strange. In the last 20 years, they've kind of like made it look more friendly. Now they call them. They used to say liquor and wine, and that was all the sign said outside. Now it says fine wine and good spirits. But, you know, it's
still a bit shady, isn't it?
It is, and it's funny because all around the borders of Pennsylvania, like New Jersey and Maryland, I've never looked on the Ohio side, but I assume it's there too. There are liquor stores all along the borders, like, sort of.
Fantastic.
So, but yeah, there's and you know, there's also a big whiskey club all over the world now called Drammers.
Yeah, and
they have chapters all over the U.S. They started in the U.S. and now they have probably 12 chapters around different major cities in the U.S. And I know they also have one in Edinburgh. And they have ones in India and Japan and Taiwan and Australia.
How is single malt Scotch perceived in America?
Well, I think the whiskey audience here is a bit bifurcated in that there's people who are just super into bourbon.
Sure.
And then there's people who are into both.
Yeah.
There are certain people, I drink both, but I drink, it's probably an 80-20 split towards Scotch.
Nice.
I mean, I have loads of friends who drink Scotch, and also there's a big Irish whiskey. There's a lot of Irish Americans, so there's a big Irish whiskey component here.
Yeah.
Although to be honest with you, the Irish whiskey selection in the U.S. isn't great yet. It's getting a lot better, but there's a lot better Irish whiskey in Ireland, whereas in Scotland they're much better at global distribution. Ireland is mostly Jameson. It's here, Bushmills and Jameson. You know, but now you start to see more and more.
Nice. And do you have the same in terms of independent bottlings from bourbon distilleries as well, I'm guessing?
Well, yes, but nowhere near. It's not quite the same. And I do know that there's a couple of people out there right now who are kind of aiming to do just that.
Yeah.
But there's actually a phenomenon here that's interesting that in a way it's very American. And I don't mean that as a good thing. There's a couple of, well, it's just, you know, Americans are very good at industrializing things, you know, and there's a gigantic company here that makes spirit for new startups. You know how so many distilleries in Scotland will make gin until the whiskey ages,
of course,
you know, or they'll do, you know, in Ireland they do bonded bottlings where it's basically independent bottling type thing where they'll buy casks, you know.
Yeah.
Here, if you want to start a distillery, and I can tell you some really well-known U.S. distilleries that have done this, High West, Whistle Pig, two newish distilleries, they buy whiskey, they buy spirit from this factory in Indiana, and they get new make spirit on day one, and then they start, and that company will also sell you aged spirit as well. So you could open your distillery, and within 30 days you could be selling stuff. It's just not your own spirit yet, you know, and you have to, and then sometimes it's hard to make the connection. When they make the transition, what if it's completely different? You know, there's only so much you can control. It's huge.
Yeah,
you know, it's just churn. It's just, well, they say that the Grant and Sons plant in is it Girvan? I think it's in Girvan.
Yep.
Someone just told me that if I was just in Scotland right when I met you, and this is very funny to me. I got to be honest with you. I've not done any research into this statement, but a woman in Girvan told me, if every whiskey warehouse on the planet disappeared today, instantly, except Girvan, the world would have whiskey for 4 years.
Wow. That is an unbelievable amount of good juice. I heard an interesting fact as well. I mean, in terms of the largest whiskey producing region, in Scotland, I certainly assumed Speyside, but it's not. It's the Lowland, and it's purely because of the grain distilleries. Yeah, which makes complete sense. But at the same time, you don't think that. But yeah, it's amazing. I don't think people realize quite how much whiskey there is in Scotland.
Well, you asked me about interesting stories that happen on set. This is kind of interesting. We went to 18 distilleries while we were filming, and when we spent a day filming at Balvenie. And when we were on the Grant & Sons campus, we had to wear high-vis, and we had to take a little watch a safety video class and about exits out of the campus and emergencies and all this stuff. And the woman who was sort of our handler guide that day, I said to her, I don't mind doing this. No one minds doing it, but I'm curious why we have to do it here and we haven't done this anywhere else.
Yeah.
And she said, we have so much alcohol aging on site that we are the safety equivalent of an Air Force base. And she said we're held to a higher level of safety protocol because of the volume of alcohol on site.
That really conjures up an amazing image of a military whiskey production, which I think is his own film potentially. And so after the movie about the independent bottlers, do you think you're going to continue making more movies about whiskey? Are there more stories to be told? Or are you going to put the dram down for a little bit and make some other movies?
The other two, I said I was working on 3 films. Okay, so the independent bottlers, we just spent a month in Germany. We're making a film about the history of beer in Bavaria.
Amazing.
And then I just literally yesterday got back from shooting. We're making a film about grains and sovereignty, the ownership of grains and grain sovereignty with brewers, bakers, distillers, chefs, all these people that are sort of standing up to industrialize grain and sort of doing their own things with it. And we were filming 2 days ago at a restaurant in New York called Blue Hill. It's one of the 12, I think it was the 12th best restaurant in the world.
Wow.
It's like a 3 Michelin star restaurant. And they're doing some incredible things with grains in their own farm. And then I've also been recently to Ireland and Kentucky, doing kind of a networking and outreach and research for a film about American whiskey and a film about Irish whiskey. But that we haven't started shooting those yet. I've just traveled there and sort of met with people.
That's amazing. Greg, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. Really, really appreciate it. I know you started early, but you're on holiday now, so that's okay. Do you want to do a quick plug for where people can watch your movie and find them?
Yeah, absolutely. If people go to watch.wateroflifefilm.com, or if you just go to wateroflifefilm.com, there's a button on there that says watch. That will take you. It's available to rent or buy and Blu-ray, Amazon, Google, Apple, and also on our own. Like I said, through our site, people can stream the extended cut, which is 10 minutes longer.
I can't wait to see that.
We'll keep everyone updated on all of our stuff there as well. So
that's great. Thank you so much, Greg. Really, really appreciate you taking time. And Slàinte.
Oh, Slàinte. I saved a tiny bit.
Yeah, just, really interesting to hear what he had to say. I'm just like, I mean, I we were talking about your pitches earlier. What would be, I mean, you look at what's been done on whiskey. It's so much, and there's so much storytelling in this industry of ours. There's so much stories, and you think of all the people that are leaving the industry or unfortunately not with us anymore, extracting those stories, creating something that's fabulous would be great.
And trying to put into one thread.
Yeah, exactly. That's the problem. But no, really, really good. Really interesting.
Great. Gordon, we'll catch up the next time. I'll keep some.
We'll wrap that up. Enjoy.
Mature Glengoyne.
Beautiful. Excellent.
Okay, folks.
You're off to Aberdeen at the weekend?
I'm off to the Granite City.
Excellent. And I was in London yesterday, so we've all been all over the place. But have a good time up there. And ladies and gentlemen, we will see you for our next episode in a couple of weeks' time.
Okay, take it away. Take me down to the Granite City where the grass is green and the girls are pretty. Oh, just I'll let that bit out.
No, keep it. It's very good.
Right?
Doing it this way since 1833. Staying ahead on the whiskey trail. Oh, staying ahead on the whiskey trail.